This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Welcome everybody to what is now the fourth meeting of EGPOA Bylaws Committee. It's March 14th, 2023, and we're beginning with our shortish agenda. I'm hoping we can make some pretty good use of our time. Top of the agenda is to revisit the issue we discussed at our last meeting, which was a proposal by several of our committee members to create a standing bylaws committee provision and to present that to the membership. And Robert Dobrish is on with us. Robert, thanks for making the time. I know you had some other commitments and it looks like you were able to move those around.
I got rid of them. I mean, it was a short hearing.
Good.
Much shorter than I thought it was going to be, but very productive.
Very good.
Is that a good thing that it was shorter than it was supposed to be, or bad?
And I want to credit Yakov Gross and Scott Goldberg, who were co-drafters of the proposal. We talked about at our last meeting in January, some concerns that board members and others on the committee had, particularly around two areas. One was that there be sort of an implied, if not explicit, requirement for a certain expertise for members who would be appointed to a standing committee. And then a second is an issue that I raised with regard to some of the language around interpreting bylaws for the board, and whether that creates sort of an oversight of the board that is, in my view, not necessary or typical in a corporate context. So I sent back, as promised, though late, some red lines to address those two concerns. And I've gotten comments back from Yakov and from Robert, but Robert, since you're here, I'll let you take the floor, and hopefully everybody who's on the call has had a chance to review. If you're a member of the committee, you will have had a chance to review the red lines as I sent them last night. But Robert, I know you have some thoughts and opinions on those, and so why don't you take over?
Well, okay. Well, it was a very lively discussion last time about the issue of lawyers or professionals being on the committee, to the extent that the committee essentially could get lawyers and professionals to be on the committee. As you see here, wait, I don't know what Stephen's iPhone is exactly. Jeff, I don't know whether Jeff is a lawyer, an accountant, a hedge fund operator, a doctor. I don't know. Jeff, what do you do?
Me, I'm a realtor, and I was a business owner. And I've been living here for 50 years.
All right, so there you go. So,
All right.
so the idea was to try to get on this committee and give essentially preference on this committee to a number of people who have had experience in business or in their profession with bylaws. That's the way it was drawn. And there were significant objections that were raised to that. I think particularly by Earl and Dan. Okay, we heard them. And Patrick, you said you would go back and work something out that might be acceptable to everybody.
And if I can just interrupt for 1 second, I'm going to share the screen while you're talking so that everybody can see the original provision with the red lines to try to do that. So keep talking. I'm sorry.
Okay. And I guess last night we received those revisions. I said nothing. I thought, well, they're not so bad. You know, you could, I think it watered it down a little bit, but something I could certainly live with. Yakov wrote a very interesting objection to it, you know, saying that this committee ought to be as professional a committee as we can get. Now, right now we've got we have two lawyers on this call and three non-lawyers. The issue here is more, how do you get people who are interested in working on the committee, then who should they be? It seems to me that's interesting. I mean, Leslie is on the committee. She has a lot to say when she's here, but she's not here very often. So the real question is, how do you get a real working committee? Because I have been on a real working committee of the bylaws committee that went to point 2 on our agenda and spent about 4 months on point 2, ambiguities in the bylaws, things that need to be corrected. I would say that David Feller and I probably put in 30 hours each easily, working, debating, trying to draft up new bylaws, all through the bylaws. Every single bylaw we went through one at a time. And it takes a lot of work. If we can't even get 8 or 10 people at a meeting, and if we take our professionals and say, you know what, you do all the work, and we're just going to criticize your work, I don't think we're going to have a happy group. So I'm prepared to live with the changes that were suggested. They're okay. I think that they're unnecessary. I think that they water down what we were trying to do a little bit. But if that's what the board wants to do, you're the board. And I think that one of the things about the bylaws committee is all you can do is make suggestions to the board. You don't have any power, really. You're not going to go to or once we did this, but go to the community and say, we want it this way and the board wants it another way, and we are writing a minority report or something. I think that happened once in my history of being on the bylaws committee, but it doesn't happen very often that a bylaws committee is going to disagree with the board. The board gets to disagree with the bylaws committee. So I just thought this was a little bit watered down, saying that interpretations really were at the request of the board. And of course, the bylaws committee is here to answer the questions of the board. What does bylaw number 17 really mean with regard to this? And now the bylaws committee, I don't think, unless it comes from a board member, the bylaws committee is not going to know what the board is doing and talking about and whether it violates a bylaw or it doesn't. It's got to be brought to the attention of the bylaws committee by a member of the board. So that being all said, I have no great objection to the changes. If those are the changes you want, fine.
So Patrick, I'm going to weigh in. So just to add some context, I luckily enough, I deal with attorneys probably as much as you do, Robert, just based off of my professional capacity. I don't
Lucky
think
you said.
And my sister's the vice president of the Georgia Bar. So being an attorney is just another job to me. I also think that my position and Dan's position was, let's ensure that this is a reflection of a larger majority of the community, with the understanding that both Dan and I are extreme professionals. I know me personally, and I'll speak for my board member peer, and just based off of the preliminary advisory that Jeff provided, that is the case too. So I think this should be a reflection of, to your point, I am more concerned about people showing up on a consistent basis every month than having 8 attorneys. Because at the end of the day, the most important value of one's time is one's available. You want to be a star, be available. Right now, it's the availability, because if I'm not correct, Robert, this is the 3rd meeting you and I have been on. Patrick's been on, but we're the only 3 that's been on in comparison to the past 3 meetings.
I think that's what I said. I agree with you.
And that right there is the bottom line. To have a opinion about this being too light, that being too light. This is not to serve an individual. This is to serve 700 plus members of the community. And from that standpoint, whatever makes the most sense to put as many people under the tent, we put as many people under the tent. That's my posture. I will always be here at the behest of Patrick. He and I are kind of locked to the hip, so I will defer to him. But I also, right now, the other issue to your point, Robert, is we got 3 board members and only 2 non-board members. We got 3 non-board members, but if the board members show up and you have 9 people that saying, hey, we want to be a part of it, and they don't show up, then all of that posturing that we've had the past few weeks gets thrown out. Because
100%.
so that's what I said. We're on the same page, Robert. Patrick, I will go on mute. I'm going to send out an apology email to everybody because I see what my mistake was. My bad, bro.
No problem. While Yakov couldn't be here, he did take the time to write back with some thoughtful comments, and I just wanted to read those out for folks. I didn't get any, well, I'll take Scott's in a second. I did get a response email from Scott to Yakov. Well, indicated that he's going to be returning to the US on Thursday, and there's a time zone difference, which is why he's unable to attend. But he said, number one, the key issue, as I see it, is whether the bylaws committee is to serve as a, quote, check and balance, unquote, on the board by becoming effectively a constitutional body of the community, or whether it is simply an advisory body that the board can choose to call on or not. The last elections made clear to me that there needs to be a check on the board when it comes to the bylaws, because otherwise there is no mechanism short of litigation for blocking board abuses such as those that we suffered as a community. I understand that no board likes to see its powers curtailed, but I think the community is looking for precisely this type of response to the problems of the past. Ultimately, this change has to be approved by a supermajority of the community, so why not give them the chance to do so? And then number two, he said, I'm not sure why we embrace the increasingly populist notion that expertise is bad, or is that there is no such thing as expertise, and therefore should populate the bylaws committee with people lacking in the required expertise. To be clear, they need not be lawyers, but they should be people with training or practical experience in drafting or interpreting contracts, and the committee will need not be limited to them, but they should be preferred candidates. And then this is bottom line, I'm opposed to the proposed edits. I believe the original draft is preferable. In my opinion, we need to create a mechanism to ensure, or at least attempt to ensure, that the evils of the past are not revisited upon us. And I guess my thought in response to the response to the second point first, is that I don't disagree that expertise should be the first and foremost thing encouraged. I just think we should make sure that the language doesn't read such that it discourages people, even if it's not, mandatory shall. If it's may, people still might read that and say, oh, I don't think that's a place where my viewpoint would be welcome. And so I think we want to make sure that however we craft it, it's not interpreted, unfortunately, by people who might otherwise want to serve. But to the first point, more importantly, I do disagree with Yakov, and I see no need, particularly look, we're $1 million homeowners association organization. We're not a systemically important bank or financial institution or other major company. I don't think we need a board, more or less what is to me a super, how did Yakov put it, a constitutional body above the board. I think the board is the body. That's the whole point. In terms of what has happened in the past, I don't know that any bylaws committee would have been able to prevent overspending or projects that got out of control. I really don't know that. And I don't know that they'd be able to do so in the future, because played out practically, what's really going to happen? You might have a constitutional body, as Yakov put it, say to the board, I think you're violating the bylaws. We interpret something this way and you're in violation of it. Well, the board still has the authority, and in fact, the duty to make whatever decision needs to be made, whether it's in the context of a project, a management decision, an employment decision, what have you. So you'll have a situation where it's either going to be some sort of standoff that would be litigated anyway. And it just seems to me to breed another layer of bureaucracy that can lead to a disagreement and a mess that's just not necessary, particularly in an organization this size. I have never seen in my years in any of my work, any company really of any size with sort of this constitutional body overseeing a board that has, sort of the right to tell a board, you're right and you're wrong. You can do this, you can't do that. There's really only one authority I've ever seen be able to do that, and it's a court, usually the Chancery Court in Delaware. But I think it's a big, huge overreach to frame it the way Yakov would like to, and that's why I've proposed the way that it's drafted now. I think it would be a seismic shift in our bylaws to create this additional governing body that's never existed before and hasn't existed since the foundation of the organization. Sorry,
Here,
Earl,
let me ask you a question, Pat.
Sure.
So I think that Yakov is responding to what happened, not what is happening. And what happened was a small group of the board took control of the board and ran with that control. And there was no place for the small group to go other than to resign. And maybe you might accept a friendly amendment to your amendment and just say, providing advice to the board or board members on their request. Supposing a board member feels as though the board is violating the bylaws, and the board says, we do not want to go to the bylaws committee. We do not want to confer with that. We don't believe we're violating the bylaws and we want to go ahead. Under the way it's written now, those board members could not go to the bylaws committee and ask for an interpretation of the bylaws, which might give them some strength in a dispute within the board if there was a violation of the bylaws that that a group of board members decided that they wanted to proceed with. What would you think of that amendment?
I think it makes common sense on its face. I worry about unintended consequences and how that could be misused politically by minority board members who aren't getting their way and who
They would have to go to the bylaws committee. The bylaws committee has several members of the board on it and other people who have experience with bylaws, with laws, with proper procedure, whatever it is. And that presumably is an independent group of those people who are non-board members are an independent group that are just looking at the words to see what they mean.
So I think one, it's presumably independent. Sorry, Earl.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Joel's hand.
Yeah, I see it, Joel. Go ahead, Joel.
So since I was that board member, okay, that didn't agree with what was going on, I think what Robert was saying is that I would have loved to have a place to go where I could have brought this out to other people to say, hey, I don't think that this is right. Okay, but I didn't have any place. The only alternative that I had was to go out on Facebook. And if I did that, they would have thrown me off the board because I would have violated my whatever privileges. So that's what I agree with you, Robert. I think there has to be some place where somebody could go to say, hey guys, I don't think this is going the right way. What do you think?
I just worry about it being politicized, and we're the reality of it is that I am more concerned about the word that you use, that adverb, presumably. That I'm not comfortable with that, Robert, because at the end of the day, there could be that entity that Joel could have went to for some advisory, but again, that can be politicized as well. I mean, there is an expectation.
But so can the board be politicized. I mean, and it was.
So
We've had
what I think-
experience with a politicized board.
I think, and I'll speak for Patrick, and Patrick, if I'm out of pocket, you can berate me right now. I hear you, but I also think at some point, this board will not be accountable for the errors of the prior board. And I think that's what's being executed here, where there's major concerns. I think we need to hear them and try to find some happy medium. But I am more concerned about this becoming a political weapon to be used when it's convenient and literally causing hysteria within the community. If something's not right with one of the board members, guess what? I don't like that, Patrick did this, or I don't like that Earl did this. So guess what? I'm going to start this firestorm, utilize this particular entity to do that. And then I, as a board member, can't go out on Facebook, but every one of those persons who sit on that committee can.
So I'm just not used to this sort of peer group of judicial
Yeah.
review concept, but I guess, Joel, to deal with your point, and I wasn't there, nor was I in your shoes, so I can't possibly understand what it was like to be you or go through that that situation. I'm just wondering what prevents a board member from speaking up, not on Facebook, which I hate, but in the meetings that are public. I mean, why wouldn't a board member have the opportunity to say, I don't think this is right? And that's why board meetings should be public, because we want to hear that debate and that dissension. Why couldn't that be enough?
I can answer your question. Because of the board at the March board meeting, I did that, but there wasn't a turnout, and I was shocked. I'm being blunt. I said that at the March meeting, that, hey, this is what's going on, guys. And there was only a handful of people at the meeting, and it never went anywhere. So when I did that, I thought I did my fiduciary responsibility to the community.
Yeah, that's a layer of engagement challenge as well, because people should be there and they should be able. That should be the number one play. People shouldn't be relying on social media to get information and engagement from any board, let alone this one.
They do.
I know they do, but I think they should be disciplined not to. Jeff, you have your hand up.
Yeah, this harkens back to, you guys weren't here. This is a while ago. The only one that would remember this is Robert. Remember the Friends of Emerald Green emails years ago?
Yeah.
All the dissension with the management company. And when they wanted to, some people on the board wanted the management company and other people on the board wanted Michael. And it was like a free for all. The bylaws committee is, a cool idea. We can't be a constitutional body that, lords over the board, but, the board also has to do the right thing. I mean, the cost overruns that we, had with this project were substantial. A lot of them were understandable considering, the times we're in. Some of them weren't. I'm not going to say anything about a certain one. Like certain thing, the elevator, there's no elevator in the pool building. Okay. And we had the gym upstairs. Now, I guess anything over 30 feet tall, I guess has to have an elevator. Who's the architect? Why didn't we go back to the architect to try to get money, get an elevator? Why wasn't there, these are it's the first thing I would be like, the architect screwed up, or did we screw up?
There is a spot to put an elevator there, but they just elected not to spend the money to do it.
Okay, now by them not spending the money, does that mean the upstairs of the building can't be used for anything now? It's just worthless space above the pool?
The space above there was a gimme. It wasn't in the original plans. It was a gimme. But if we want, we can spend and put a lift in and get a lift to, so people can go up there.
All right. I mean, I'm just, just wondering, I would assume that an architect would be smart enough to put it in his plans that.
Well, like I said, if you look when next time you're in the pool house, look at the stairs. You can see that there's a squared out space alongside the stairs that's designed to put a lift in, get people up to the second floor.
All right.
So,
I mean, that was just the question that I had, because it just seemed like such an obvious overthought that it was just stupid. But
we're making the assumption that the architect didn't. So in an architectural space, they will provide whatever the code permits. And then the client, whomever that client is, will have options where you could use this space for an elevator, you can use this space for a stairwell, either current state or future state, long as it stays within the confines of the certificate of occupancy in the building plan, the building department. We don't know if they did provide that option or not. It would have been whomever was engaging.
There's an option there for that. There's an option there for that. It's
See?
set up for an elevator. It's all set up. You just gotta buy nobody asked the question. It's set up.
So it's when we make
All
assumptions.
wired. If you wanted to do it next week, we don't have the funding for it, but you can put a lift in there.
In the future, we could do it. It could be another
Exactly.
small assessment, or, you know, like rolled into the, what is it called, fund, the general fund somehow.
I just want to make sure we're not making assumptions, to Michael's point, because as an architect, I guarantee you, he would have provided options. And if we make the assumption that it is, then it kind of trickles downhill. Well, from a leadership perspective, Mike, what did you not do? What did not happen here? When we don't have that information, then it puts us in a situation that we start to speak about things that kind of start a firestorm.
All right.
Aren't we getting a little off course?
Yeah, a little bit. But
All right, hey,
but
I
I think
was just bringing up the past, because the past, you know, Emerald Green has a long storied history with boards and fighting and, you know, emails going out. This is like almost pre-Facebook, you know, like start of Facebook time before you guys were here. So I'm just letting you know how this could like spiral. So
yeah,
Jeff, I second that. Do you remember David Page?
oh God, yes, I do.
And what he used
He
to
tried
do
to get
is
a bunch of
he used to go
people
out
on the board. He was trying to harvest ballots.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
He was trying to harvest ballots.
And
that's
elected
why we
himself
don't-
president.
Uh-huh.
That's why we don't have proxies anymore.
Yeah, but Michael,
This
do
is
you
why we
remember
can't
why
have electronic
we
voting.
didn't have proxies then either? And it wasn't until David Page was called out by a lawyer and told that he had no right under the bylaws to go out and get proxies, and Robert's rules didn't give him any right to do that he finally got a little bit nervous and stopped doing it. But so all kinds of things. There's a history here in this community, as Jeff said,
There's
of boards that are kind of run away. And right now we have a terrific board. We have a young board. We have an energetic board. We have an exciting board. It's really great. But you guys don't know that you're going to be here forever. It's, you know, it's that youthful, wonderful feeling that we can accomplish saving the world.
I've been here for every board since the beginning of Emerald Green. The first board, two guys, Manny Winnick and Joe Rhoda, decided that the indoor pool was not worth fixing anymore because it froze. And they decided on their own, without the whole community, to knock down a big, beautiful building that could have been a lot nicer than our entertainment if had they kept it, and fill in the pool. But that's, you know, here nor there. That was their decision. And that was a board decision without any community involvement. That's when there was probably less than 100 homeowners years ago.
so let me try to move our conversation along a little bit. It does sound like there's some consensus that creating a super constitutional body above the board isn't necessarily what we're going for,
No.
and that we could potentially work with the language that we've got in the first change here. I just want to highlight the changes I had a little farther down, and then I do want to bring up some additional language Scott Goldberg has proposed for adding a preamble, which I think it would sort of help explain what's going on here a little bit too. So this is the language with regard to qualifications to serve on this committee. And so I added what is really, I mean, it's not really controlling language. It's just, while it may be desirable for the board to include professionals who have this experience, it's not a requirement that for service on the committee. I think that's different. It's slightly, as Robert put it, watered down from shall include, but shall not be limited to. It just was sort of, I think it's saying similar things, just in a more plain English way, like you might see, not necessarily a legal document. So if folks have thoughts or reactions to that language, certainly speak up. And Jeff, your hand's still up. I'm going to lower it. I don't think, feel free to just jump in.
I just left it up. I accidentally left it up.
No worries, no worries.
No, you know, like I said, something like this, you know, could, you know, could cause problems or not. I mean, what particular bylaws are we tightening up? Like, what ones are we going after first? Like, what is like a bone of contention in the bylaws right now that needs to be strengthened? Like, what's like the first thing that seriously that you guys would look at?
Oh, I think that there are some problems with notices, with meetings, with you know, there are quite a number of tweaks that can be made in the bylaws. I ran through them myself and have not gone over my changes with anyone else. By the way, but I have comments on about at least 10 of the bylaws that could be slight amendments, not big amendments, but tweaks. And as I understand it, Patrick, you've got one that might be sort of a major one about the use of funds. So there are quite a number of bylaws that could be presented to the community for change. And it would be great if you could do it in one presentation, and that would be marvelous. But we're running out of time for that now. It may be next year that you're going to do that.
I mean, I'm getting information out to the community in, you know, timely fashion. I'm sure that's something that everybody could agree on needs to be done, because obviously you could hide things if you don't get information out to the community, and people feel that they're being slighted if they don't know that a meeting is, like if the people with the boat slips, because that's going to be a show. But anyway, if they didn't know about that meeting, they're going to feel they're being slighted, and everything's not above board. I mean, that's just the way it is in this community. I'm just putting it out there. I've been here a long time, and you know, as far as, so Robert, all the like bylaw changes that you're like looking at, why just basically, is there like a list that you could like forward, like the actual changes for each bylaw that you're like looking
I think that should, I think actually the right way to do it, I mean, if I were doing it, we don't have a subcommittee of the bylaws committee that has been designated to read these bylaws and make suggestions to the full committee for which bylaws should be changed and how should they be changed. That might be step one in order to get this committee working, so that some people, you know, I mean, it could be, they don't have to be lawyers. Some people should sit down and spend some time. But they do have to be people who have time. Spend some time meeting, reading the bylaws, talking about which bylaws need to be changed, if any, and then discussing it at a bylaws committee, saying to the committee, these are the bylaws that we think ought to be changed. Do you agree? Assuming that you get agreement on that, you then assign people to change the, you know, rewrite those bylaws or make the edits in those bylaws.
amendments to them.
It makes sense. That's all.
All right. I mean,
Once
that's
you've
as
done
far as
that,
like
you submit it to the board.
yeah, that's about as far as a committee like that we're talking about could go. I mean, to make recommendations
Absolutely.
to the board.
That's
That's all
as far as
we
the
could do. We
committee can
can't become a constitutional body. We can make recommendations that bylaws be changed. These are the amendments we're looking for and the reasons for it. And that's it. And just go from there.
Absolutely. That should be a primary goal of the committee, to get the bylaws modernized and changed to make sense for 2023 to 2030.
And I
Um,
think, I also think that a translation in layman's language, not legalese, would help people in the community understand the bylaws a little bit. A lot of them are laid out in legalese. People don't like to read legalese. If it was laid out in a more straightforward manner, you would probably get a lot more better reception. I'm just,
Robert, to your earlier point about next steps, I know we talked about it, and apologies if it needs to be formalized in any way, but I know I think Scott had volunteered to help you with that sort of as a task. We talked about being task force, I think in December or January.
We had talked about it, yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Folks to look at those sort of ambiguities. So if you need some sort of formalization, consider it done right now, that you and Scott and whoever else wants to help should do that and present back as early as you're ready.
Maybe Leslie wants to help us.
Maybe we'll have to ask her.
Yeah.
I know Leslie wanted to sit down in person to do this meeting. Of course, that's not possible. And God, even if we were all in the same town at the moment, I don't think it would be possible to do up there. It sounds like the snow is quite heavy. So look, I want to try to keep us moving. It doesn't sound like it's a great reaction to the proposal to change the language here. I think we're saying we want expertise first and foremost, but we don't want to discourage anyone. But I also want to bring up and share Scott's proposed.
Yeah, good, because I didn't see that, Patrick. I was in
He
my
just
meeting.
sent it this afternoon, so I have to find, here it is. I have so many screens open. Okay, I'm going to do new share. There we go. So you should be seeing preamble, purposes of the bylaws committee. And I'll just give folks a moment to read this to themselves. And
Is it supposed to show up on the screen? I don't see it on your screen, on the screen.
Okay,
you don't?
I just see, yes.
come on.
Okay, let me do this. Hang on, let me stop the share and then redo it. I was doing share new screen, and who knows if I did that the right way. Bear with me.
Oh, I see it. I got it on one screen. I just got to move it over. Hopefully it'll let me do that.
See it now?
I see it on my small screen. I can't read it though.
Bylaws committee should be used.
Patrick, it only goes as far as number 2.
Yeah, I have to scroll down. I want to give
Okay,
folks the
all right.
opportunity.
I think that's.
Yes.
Oops, sorry. And I guess number 2 kind of is, Robert, is a little along the lines of what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Two is along the lines of what I was talking about. Yeah.
Scroll down here. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
My reaction to the last part is that I think procedure is good, but I don't know if you want to have necessarily a prescribed procedure. I think folks should be able to do what makes good sense.
Yeah, I don't think, I think that last paragraph is to some extent dangerous, but I think that it would be up to the bylaws committee, I think, to whether to attempt to go to the community with a protest that and that something bad has happened, that there's something rotten in the state of Emerald Green. And 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 I just think that that would depend on the bylaws committee, on who they are. You know, I mean, you're gonna have plenty of board members on the bylaws committee. Or any individual, I suppose, would have the right. I mean, Leslie certainly went out and she was able to gather meetings at the clubhouse or at the pool and get plenty of people excited about things. So I guess people can do that if they want to. As individuals, one could say, I am a member of the bylaws committee and I've been privy to various conversations, and I want you, my fellow residents and members of this property owners association to know what's going on. I guess that that's free speech, and I think we're all in favor of that. So anybody would have the right to do it if they want to. I don't think you definitely need 3. But I think 2 is a good idea.
Just looking at this here. Yeah, I would think that, I mean, first of all, I think we would all hope this is a rarely, if ever used feature of the bylaws committee.
Oh, sure.
And so I would think that whatever procedure makes sense for that bylaws committee is something that they should sort of work out themselves, and you know, having a hearing within X days and, you know, notice. And I don't know. I just think it adds another layer of bureaucracy that's not needed.
I agree with that. I don't think you need that.
So, and I don't know if we need necessarily then, I mean, we can include this sort of preamble, but, and I'm going to stop the share and come back to the red line version that I had and see if we can't, based off, I think, Robert, you had some, oops, hang on. Let's do share. You had some proposed
just thought that
revisions,
you
the friendly
might put
amendment,
in-
as you put it.
Instead of the board asking the bylaws committee to do something, what Scott's got is, should certain number of people on the board do it? I had said, or board member, or you could say, or at least 2 board members, or at least 3 board members, something like that. I think might help.
Let me do this. Oops.
Because the board can shut down at request, and the bylaws committee would never even know that there's a problem, a potential problem with what's going on. That happened last year, in the last board, that people were told that they couldn't talk about the report with regard to the water company. By the way, Jeff, I think that, and Patrick, I think that one of the things the bylaws should address is the water company, and it seems to me that there is absolutely no basis on which the water company can control its own bylaws and make itself immune from criminal acts and make the community responsible for the defense of criminal acts. If you have read the water company's bylaws, I think you're going to fall off your chair. But I don't see how that ever happened and how it was allowed to happen. But the community's bylaws should somehow be a check on anything like that happening. That's my own feeling.
Right.
That's answering Jeff's questions about what bylaws should be changed. That should certainly be looked at as to how that could happen. But I would be comfortable if you're just providing advice to the board, or no, for interpretation of the bylaws. Did you just add, or any board member?
Yeah, I just added
Yeah.
those.
I think that changed. I think that's, I think that probably would satisfy Joel, certainly satisfies me.
Joel, thoughts?
I don't know, I gotta read it, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Committee shall be a standing committee and providing advice to the board, any board member on the board or any request for interpretation. That works. That works.
Okay. So why don't I do this? I'm going to save this. And then I will, I mean, I don't know if we want to, do we consider ourselves to be a quorum enough to vote on this now? We only have 4
Do
people
you
here.
consider us a quorum?
I don't, to be honest. I think we should have more
Well, why
folks
don't
weighing
we
in.
just present it for approval at the next board member, at the next board meeting, at the next bylaws meeting?
Right. Agreed.
Yeah, and send it out the way it's now written and amended. And send it out and say that this proposal is something that was discussed, agreed upon, assuming we agree upon it, and will be voted on at the next bylaws meeting. So at least we'll have something.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. All right, so let's go on to number 2 on our agenda, which is the ongoing review of the bylaws for ambiguities. I think we actually covered that in
Yeah,
our
I'll
remainder of our discussion.
contact Yaakov and Scott and see whether or not I can arrange for a meeting of the 3 of us to go through the, or independently and then come together for what changes ought to be looked at. And is Jeff still on?
He is.
I'm here.
Yeah, Jeff, would you like to do that with us?
Sure.
Okay, so if you could just send me your email address,
Okay.
send it to RZDobrish, DOBRISH @gmail.com.
Oh, I have you. I have you in the email. I'll get that to you.
And
Okay.
in my notes to the committee from today's call, I'll let folks know that if they want to join you in that effort, that they should
Oh, that's
raise their
good.
hands.
Sure. Good. The more the merrier.
Okay, quick update on corporate governance modernization. That project has taken me a little longer than I expected. There's a lot of information out there, and we have a really helpful resource that Michael has pointed me to. Of course, I'm drawing a blank on the name of it right now. That Emerald Green belongs to, our board belongs to. So I'm pulling together a number of those sorts of resources, but they're written policies and procedures. For things like conflicts of interest, code of ethics, management controls, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all, I think, important things that we're currently missing, but it's a lot. So I'm continuing to work on that. My hope is to be able to present that in one of our next couple of meetings. It, of course, isn't something that is necessarily bylaws mandated. It won't become part of the bylaws. It's not something that will go out to the community for a vote, but I do think it's important because the function of this committee, it just seems to fit naturally. And so if nothing else, I'd just love y'all's input on it. So I'm going to get that over to folks as soon as possible. And then finally on our agenda is a proposal to consider the possibility of increasing the percentage of dues for buildable and non-buildable lots. That idea, frankly, came from, I've heard it mentioned by other folks on the board. But Hal Simon asked me to put that on there. Hal isn't here to reflect further or to amplify it right now, but I'll ask him if he can attend our next bylaws committee meeting to talk a little bit more about that. I think just at a general level, it is what it sounds like, which is to change the bylaws whereby lots would have sort of a larger contribution to the operating budget and to any assessment budgets going forward. I think it's an effort to try to figure out how we can maximize revenues. So
I'm okay with that, but I think to increase the dues to the people that don't have unbuildable lots, I don't think that's right. But I think the people that have buildable lots, I don't see any, at this stage of the game, they should be building houses. It's something that's been around for 50 years.
yeah, and not meant to spark any debate on any nuance whatsoever. Just sort of throwing this idea out there. It's one idea that's percolating to try to shore up the finances a little bit or increase our ability to fund certain things. But again, it's nowhere near baked, and not I don't want to see on Facebook that we're increasing dues on buildable or non-buildable lots, because it's just an idea. It's a germ of an idea at this point. So with that, anybody have anything else you want to raise? Any questions? Okay. Thank you guys so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and appreciate everyone's hard work. So we'll see you soon. Hey, a reminder that we have our regular board meeting this Sunday, March 19th. Starts at 9 a.m. In the new Entertainium building in the boardroom that's now open. I want to encourage, whether you're watching this video or you're here with us right now, I want to encourage people to attend in person if possible. It will be hybrid videoed out on Zoom. So people will have the chance to participate that way. But given the technical issues we had the last time, I'm hoping they're fixed, but you never know. But more importantly, we're having our New York State Assembly member, Arlene Gunther, join us. I've invited the Assembly member because I think she can talk a little bit about constituent services, and hopefully folks in the community will have some thoughtful questions for her. I think it's also important for our board and our organization to build good working relationships with our local elected officials when we need things, like, for example, with our lakes and our dams, and we may need state help and state grant money and all that sort of stuff. So it's a good thing, in my view, to have good working relationships with those local, state, and federal elected officials. So my hope is that that'll be an ongoing sort of thing. We'll have the Assembly member this time, and I don't know, I'll invite our Congress member, our state senator, et cetera, in for future meetings, town supervisor, all those kind of folks. I think it's really helpful that folks get to interact with their electeds and figure out where to get constituent services. But so join us Sunday, and with that, we'll see everybody.
Okay, take care. Thanks, Patrick.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.